Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're going to discuss all about humidity, and this is a video request sent in by my viewer Diana about 2 weeks ago in my previous Sunday video request. So let's see what humidity really is, how it affects our orchids and why it's important, and also discuss about some ways to control it, both to increase humidity but also to decrease it. So we measure humidity in the air by referring to relative humidity. It is a percentage of the water vapor present in the air. And here I have a weather station. It measures my temperature and also my humidity. And as you can see, it is expressed in a percentage. Humidity forms as water evaporates in the air, and in nature this is such a common process, and pretty much this is how clouds are formed. A percentage of 100% humidity means that the air cannot hold any more water vapor, and at this percentage water will start to liquefy once again. So presumably in your room you have 100% humidity. That is the point where you will start to see water droplets forming on the surfaces in that room. And of course, the lower you go in the percentage, the less amount of water vapor you have in the atmosphere. Humidity plays a major role in the well-being of an orchid. Returning a little bit to the discussion we had yesterday about orchid leaves, and by the way, if you missed it, I'll add it in an info card here or in the description below. Leaves of plants transpire, meaning they release water into the air. Just like with humans, the higher the humidity in that environment is, the lower the water loss rate will be as well. So overall, humidity helps our orchids by maintaining water inside of them, inside of the leaves and inside of their structures. And the vast majority of our orchids are epiphytic, meaning they do not grow in soil, they grow in trees, where water is not as abundant, nor is it available all the time. So humidity is an important factor for them simply because they are very prone to water loss through respiration, and they simply cannot get any more water than what they have in their natural environment. And if an epiphytic orchid is found on a tree or on a rock, let's say it's a lithophite, obviously she will not have a big quantity of water at her disposal, so she needs to conserve. Now, our orchids developed in accordance to their environment, and some of them grow in pretty high humidity environments. This is why for the vast majority of orchids we grow, humidity should be at a middle ground level or a higher level rather than a very low percentage. In very low humidity percentages, water loss is more abundant, and some orchids really will not handle it that well. Now, the most common orchids we can find out there are orchids that do not come from very high humidity environments or are just man-made hybrids to withstand low humidity and home environments, because now many of us have 70% humidity in our home. Thus, having high humidity levels is not imperative for most orchids, such as Phalaenopsis, Oncidiums, Cattleyas, Dendrobiums, and so on. However, even for these, a sort of medium humidity level is ideal. So if you have around 40 to 50% humidity in your growing space, you can do absolutely fine with the vast majority of orchids you can purchase today. Luckily, many people do benefit from around 40% humidity in their homes, and this will be very strictly related to the climate you actually live in. But there are those of us who live in very hot and very dry climates. Also, there are those of us who use heaters in the wintertime, and heaters do dry out the atmosphere. So for this reason, our orchids might suffer a little bit in the wintertime or in our very hot and dry climates. So I think it's fitting to talk about ways to increase humidity for our orchids. So as I was saying earlier, humidity forms due to water evaporating into the air. And on this principle, we can increase humidity in our growing rooms by providing water to evaporate. But placing some jars or some plates of water is really not enough, and I will tell you why. A volume of pure water will have surface tension. Now, I'll give you a more elaborate explanation in an article down below in the description. And having water tension means it will evaporate slower. In the hobby, you might have already heard about the humidity trays, which imply you to put some water into some trays and also some pebbles to help with evaporation. The pebbles will actually break the surface tension. However, they're not the best at doing this. Pebbles usually have a flat surface, so on that flat surface the water will be flat as well. Thus, we will still have some surface tension. What works best is a very porous material, and as an example I can give you the ceramides that I have here, but also leca beads are porous as well. They break the surface tension much better than pebbles. Lava rock will work in the same way. Not to mention that these materials are also water absorbent. So they will continuously wick water and make it evaporate into the air very fast. The higher the rate of evaporation, the higher the humidity will be around that area, given enough water that these materials can absorb. Now, as you can see, all my setup is made out of clay. I have clay pots, clay medium, and so on. And the humidity around my orchids is very, very high, no matter if my relative humidity in the greenhouse is lower than this, simply because I always have water evaporating. The porous clay helps it. Also, I have a lot of surface area that evaporates. And this leads me to tip number 2. If you want to have a greater evaporation rate and therefore greater humidity, use multiple trays, not only one under one orchid. That will not help too much, but a few around your orchids will give a better result. Also, the wider they are and the shallower they are, the more humidity they will provide rather than smaller and deeper ones. You are aiming for a wider evaporation area, helped by some materials that break the surface tension of the water. Now, I did an experiment a while back, and I have to tell you that one little dish with some pebbles and some water doesn't really raise humidity all that much. I would have to say it's pretty useless. So you do need multiple humidity trays if you want to go this route. Now, humidity trays can do a lot of good in an environment which is not super dry, but it could benefit of some more humidity. There are those environments though that are absolutely dry and very hot, and in this instance a better solution will be a humidifier. Now, there are all sorts of humidifiers on the market. Some of them work with steam, some of them are ultrasonic, which provide cool mist. I would have to say go for the ultrasonic one, because most of our orchids really don't appreciate hot air or hot environments. A cool mist humidifier will perform a lot better, and I think it will give overall much better results in increasing the humidity in your environment. Of course, if you have a big room, one humidifier will not be enough, but I think for a normal room, let's say the size of your bedroom, one humidifier is enough to provide that extra humidity orchids do appreciate. And as I was saying, the vast majority of orchids available will prefer a relative humidity of 40% or more. If you can provide 50%, that's great. 60% is even better. 70%, you kind of need to be careful, because too high of a humidity can lead to some other troubles. Now, with humidity comes a lot of great things, but a lot of bad things as well if you're not careful. Molds and fungi really do love moisture as well. And if your room is not ventilated or aerated regularly, molds will feel at home in your orchid pots and even on your orchids. So the higher you go with the humidity, the more fresh air you need to provide to your environment and the more air movement. So you don't have pockets of stale air, which will promote molds and fungus and even bacterial disease and fungal disease and all of that. So for this reason, in a growing space, I really wouldn't go higher than 70% with humidity. There is such a thing as too much humidity, and it's really easy to have issues if you cannot provide the air ventilation I was talking about. For the vast majority of our orchids, 70% is heaven. There are a few orchids that do require a little bit more, but those are the Masdevallias, the Draculas, things we don't really find in stores, and also orchids that are intended for more experienced growers than beginners or even intermediate growers. I myself am not very good with Masdevallias, and because they do require more effort from me to adjust my environment. And speaking about too much humidity, if you would like to decrease it, you can simply refresh the air in your room. Open the windows, let fresh air come in, let that humidity go out. It's a really easy way to get rid of that water vapor. But let's presume that outside it's very humid as well. Well, in this case, you can absolutely use a dehumidifier in your growing area. Dehumidifiers collect the moisture in the atmosphere and store it in a liquid form, and pretty much what you will have is distilled water. And here's a nice little bonus: you can actually use that distilled water to rewater your orchids. Keep in mind though, if you're using pollutants in the air, such as air fresheners, or if you're using your dehumidifier in the kitchen where you'll have oil vapors and all of that, the water will not be good for orchids. But if you have a totally separate growing area, you can reuse that water and be a little bit more economical with watering. My solution with the humidity issue is the clay setup. No matter what happens in my greenhouse, I will always have humidity around my orchids, simply because my clay pots and my medium act as humidity trays, and they're much better than humidity trays added. So if the clay setup is something you are fancying, I'll share with you in the description below some videos where I talk about the clay pots, the medium that I'm using, and so on. So for this reason, in my environment, there will never be the issue of humidity. One, because my environment is not necessarily super dry, but it can be dry sometimes. And second, my greenhouse will never be dry due to all of this clay you see here. As a last idea, in your environment, the hotter it is, the more humidity you will require, because in warm temperatures, the metabolism of the orchid is faster. Also, in many cases, hotter temperatures mean drier air, but for a general idea, in hotter temperatures, you do need more humidity, while in lower temperatures, you will not need that much humidity. Again, because the metabolism of the orchid is slower, it will not lose as much water as it will lose in a high temperature environment. Also, the higher humidity you have, the more you need fresh air and ventilation in your growing area. And vice versa, the lower the humidity rate, the need for ventilation decreases as well. It never goes to zero, but it decreases. So alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for suggesting it. I thought it was a great video to talk about. And if you have other suggestions for a video request on Sunday, just let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear from you, and maybe I'll do a video on your request. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss anything that I post. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye! Let's play a little game. How many of you know what these orchids are right here? I'm just gonna show you the pseudobulbs and not the flowers, and of course we're gonna talk about them in a video. But I just wanna see if you can guess. What do you think these orchids are?